There's this somewhat off the wall artist that my husband's been into for years. You may have seen him in that Netflix show Beef, David Choe. I follow him on Instagram. He's got some weird material. However, he's got some really interesting insights. He's someone who really looks at mastering himself and how to improve how he interacts with the world and people around him. So some time ago, I watched one of his videos and just kind of like buried in the middle of it somewhere, and I can't find it again, of course. He used the phrase Tony and Timmy, and it made me chuckle and it stuck with me ever since. What he was talking about was being intentional about the tone in which you say something and the timing with which you say it, which seemed to completely resonate with our worlds and business more ways than one. So the first thing that came to my mind was how I personally have had a struggle with my tone and my timing. I naturally, my default tends to be a little biting, to be a little harsh, to be quick to speak, and to feel like what I'm saying is of such importance that you should absolutely drop what you're doing to listen to what I have to say. How this shows up professionally is in a few different chunks of our world. So first of all, in communicating with our fellow leaders, especially if we're the owner of the organization or the owner of a team in terms of like a group within the organization, we may have a tendency to think that my answer is the right answer and I'm going to shove it down your throat to make sure that you hear me because there's a fear of not being heard in the mix. So conflict with leadership shows up a good amount of times. Communication with clients, of course, is another major one that we have to look at. Am I choosing the right tone if the client has really irritated me or it's a bad timing that they've decided to call, whatever. And then again, the timing in which we deliver information to our clients can make a massive difference in how they hear it as well. And then perhaps the time that I talk about it the most, and this is maybe telling about my own perception of things too, is when we're training new members of teams. If you've brought someone onto your team recently and we work together professionally, chances are I've encouraged you to have them shadow you. And I've asked you to ask them to reflect on 3 different questions. The first one is, what did you hear me say? The second one is, how did you hear me say it? Tone. And there's a third one that I rarely bring up, but I do think it's important to bring it up, is in what context did you hear me say that? And if we can ask ourselves those questions, and then the people who are shadowing us to think through those questions, it'll allow them to pick up on our mannerisms and the things that we do naturally way more quickly, essentially downloading our brains without having to think about every little thing that we say and how we say it. Of course, these 3 questions can be massively important in our personal worlds as well. If you have children and you are attempting to get them to do something, I think that you know as well as anyone that tone and timing can make a massive difference. If you don't have children and you're just simply working with your family, your husband, your spouse, your wife, your whatever, tone and timing also makes a massive difference. It completely alters the way that a message is received, and it's up to us to make sure that the messages that we're attempting to deliver are actually received properly. I also like to think to myself that old bold law that we talk about in Keller Williams all the time is how you show up here is how you show up everywhere. So if this is something that you're kind of bypassing and not really thinking about in your professional world, chances are it's probably showing up in your personal world as well. So Tony and Timmy, if we're not friends with them yet, we should get to know them a little bit better. Let's really zero in and focusing on how can I improve my tone and my timing.